Welcome to another episode of the And Why Is That podcast. And let's just remind ourselves why we call it And Why Is That, because it appears to be the follow-up question that media never ask nowadays. Today we're going to be interrogating the topic of crime and punishment. It's a catchy title. Somebody might have written a book to that title a few years back. Do you remember who?
Charles Dickens, maybe?
Possibly, yes. And joining us is a well-known Melbourne business identity and lapse lawyer. We are going to be talking to Francis Galbally. Now, Francis, a name for those in Melbourne, it's a name that's very well known. But Francis, for the benefit of our audience, can you take us through the family history in Melbourne and in particular in the legal and in the legal and political world?
Thanks, John and Alexander. So I have my grandfather was a Supreme Court judge, Victoria, Sir Norman O'Brien. My uncle, Norman O'Brien, was a Supreme Court judge. My father was a criminal lawyer, Frank Galbally, well known. And my uncle, his brother, was Jack Galbally, who was a barrister but also a politician. And was a Labor politician for many years. My father was Labor but moved to Liberal after Whitlam ruined the country and joined Malcolm Fraser. So, in fact, my father was responsible for setting up SBS and a range of migrant services for the migrant community. We're Irish Catholic. And very proud of it.
And a Collingwood supporter.
And for my sins, very much a Collingwood supporter.
And I should point out that we're recording this on Friday, the 12th of September, 2025, because every day we open a newspaper, or nowadays we actually turn on our computers and have a look at the newspaper.
Some of us still read newspapers.
Okay, yes. You're entitled to do so.
Yes.
You're one of the 5 people still doing so.
Yes.
You are as well. You're the sixth. You're the sixth. Yes. Well done. So, unfortunately, there's inevitably a new story, and by the time this goes to air in a few days' time, who knows what else has happened. But we have a policy of starting these discussions with a probably difficult and somewhat controversial comment and question. And to me, the obvious one is a week ago, we had 2 young boys, both of Sudanese descent, hacked to pieces in the streets of an outer Melbourne suburb that I'd never heard of before. Apparently it's somewhere near Melton. And this lasted as a news story barely a day.
Yeah.
How on earth have we got to the point that sort of murderous, heinous and horrendous crime, savagery on our streets is not the leading story for at least until, unfortunately, Charlie Kirk got shot?
Well, we have a government out of control in the sense that it can't control anything. And I think it goes back to the violence that we've seen in our construction industry, that Jacinta Allen, who was the minister responsible, has just turned a blind eye to it. So I think you have politicians who no longer care about what is the most important thing for a government to do, and that is to provide safety to the citizens, and they don't.
So what would be the logical extension of this from a cultural perspective if the government and the police are unable to provide safety for the populace? What's the logical extension?
Well, the logical extension is terrible, actually, because what will happen is you will have people themselves taking into their own hands protection, vigilantes.
We saw this to an extent a couple of weeks ago when a chap was about to get carjacked in his front yard, and managing to keep the doors locked, he reversed out of his driveway and then drove his car at the offenders.
Well,
which was on camera and shown on television, which
any
perhaps...
any person who is involved in security, and uh, I do chair a company that is involved in physical security,
Right.
so I'm aware of, and that's access control and CCTVs. You never ever try to go out and catch the culprits. That's the last thing you do.
What you want to do is have them go away.
You have them go away, you lock
Yes.
yourself up, you
Yes.
give them everything.
Yeah.
Do never ever try to fight back. But unfortunately, younger people will want to fight back, and they'll want to take justice into their own hands, and they'll want to hurt the perpetrators.
Yes.
And we all feel for that. But this is not a vengeance movie.
Well, and then it then becomes the irretrievable breakdown of society, because it's the law of the jungle. Those who can and are strong enough will dominate those who can't and are weak.
Total law of jungle. You cannot have that, and it will be disaster. But government needs to stand up. Our
Right.
government is not. Although I will say one thing, I think the new police commissioner, from what I can see at the moment, is very good.
Now, he's from Christchurch,
Yes.
and he's former he's a New Zealander, as I was originally. I'm tipping he's a bit of a hard ass, as they call him.
I think he is, and I think he's the right person. We have not had a decent police commissioner since Kel Glare.
Right. Yeah.
We've had terrible police commissioners appointed by terrible governments, unfortunately.
But doesn't that then flow down into the culture of the police force?
Of course it does.
And so how do you resolve that? Can the guy at the top do it in a short space of time? Or?
No. Unfortunately, this is going to take some years. But the culture isn't just through the police force. If I was a policeman and I arrested somebody who had just carjacked somebody's car and then took him to the courts, and then he was let off on bail, I would be throwing my hands up in despair and saying, why is this happening? What is happening here? So policing's one thing, but the most important thing are the people who are supposed to enforce the laws, the judges, the magistrates. They're half the problem.
Can I just share, to exactly to that point, share, as I did with you earlier, a bit of a personal story? I had my luxury car stolen as a result of a home invasion, basically. I was at home when it happened. I was aware of some noise. I didn't take any action because I thought it was one of our animals. It was a young fellow who broke into the house, stole the car keys, stole the car, jumped over a substantial fence, and had been wandering around the neighbourhood with his mates, 4 of them altogether, in another stolen vehicle, trying and targeting particular luxury cars. When I realised it had gone later in that morning, and I called the police, the policeman who arrived said, well, we pretty much know who this is because they've been doing it for the last 3 months. And every time we catch them, they get bailed with no cash or on their parents' recognizance.
How do we fix it?
Well, I think there are two things. I think Parliament needs to change laws and make it stricter in relation to bail. That's one. But I think magistrates and judges need to respect the community.
How do they hear from the community?
Well, they should.
No, but how do they hear from the community?
Well,
The community doesn't.
the question is, do we have an effective opposition to raise these issues?
Well, I mean, judges live in the community.
Do they?
They live it. Well, you would wonder, but they do live in the community, and they should be applying. They should be listening to what the community wants, and they should apply what the community demands. Now, there are some things, of course, that judges need a discretion about, and I move just to one moment to the mushroom case. I think any person in this community should listen to the judgment given by His Honour in that case, because he thoroughly explained what the principles are in relation to sentencing.
Mm.
And I think people should understand that. But I think the problem with bail and children is that if an offender commits more than one offence after they've been bailed, they should not be bailed. And I think that will change their whole mental attitude as to what they're doing. Number one. Number two, parents should take responsibility for children
Yep.
who are living with them under the age of 16. If a child under the age of 16 commits a carjacking or some other offence,
Serious crime.
the parents should be financially responsible for the damage.
Mm.
It's a no-brainer.
Mm.
Once you get that right, I think you'll change the attitude.
In a lot of these cases, I'm presuming
Mm.
that the theft of the automotive vehicle is not for financial gain. It's
Well,
just-
yes and no. This is interesting.
It's just for laughs.
They put them in a container and they send them off to points north in Asia, where a vehicle such as mine has a dollar value 6 or 7 times the value here, given the taxes that are applied in places like Indonesia or Malaysia. Or Singapore, for that matter. But they don't go to Singapore because Singapore is very well policed. So they do tend to go to places like Malaysia or Indonesia. But back to the question.
Just to your point,
Yes.
though, Alexander, just for 1 minute, John. It used to be that they would take the car for a joyride. In fact, there was an offence specifically aimed at that because that's what they did.
Mm.
I don't believe today they do that. I believe today what John is saying is right. You have these criminal gangs, whatever nationality they're from, who get these kids to either carjack or they do jewellery stores too.
Mm.
They just come in, they have hammers, they smash on the glass, they go in and they steal the jewellery. They're all done by criminal gangs. So I don't believe they're doing it just for a lurk, so to speak.
Right.
I think they're actually doing it because they're getting money from somebody, maybe a small amount, a couple of grand or something, but that's why they're doing it. And if that's the case, you've got to jump on them hard early.
But that's not happening, but that's a logical series of events. So why isn't that happening? This issue's been running for many, many years now, and there's been no resolution. There's been no action.
Well, if you've
taken.
got a premier who lives in Bendigo who has no idea about the real world, that's what happens. And we had a premier before that who lived in Ballarat.
Yes.
No idea.
So one of the things here is that as communication professionals, we can observe that when certain issues like this horrendous attack and murder, double murder in out of Melton happened, very quickly the government wants to change the conversation.
Correct.
And they do that quite adroitly, I have to say. They're very good at doing it. You can say that the legacy media are complicit in it and so on and so forth. But media nowadays are, in fact, magpies. So it's a shiny thing over here and a shiny thing over there.
We like magpies.
You do like a magpie. But they're focused on immediate eyeballs. So it's quite relatively easy for a cynical operative to change the focus. And it was interesting that that's exactly what they did after this event. They moved rapidly from the horror of the front pages and the Herald Sun and even the Age and whatever to and the Australian to today we're going to announce our new treaty arrangements.
I know.
And that was in my view, a deliberate ploy to change the conversation
Absolutely.
quite successfully.
And you've got the 2 parents or the 4 parents of those 2 Sudanese kids, 12 and 15, who died. They didn't do anything other than they were in their streets and a bunch of hoodlums came and chop them up.
Yeah.
And what politician has come out and said this is the most horrific thing? Have you seen Jacinta Allen go and speak to
No.
the father
No.
of that child?
No.
She has no idea.
She's no interest.
No interest.
No.
She's more interested in giving millions of taxpayers' money to Aboriginals for some form of peace treaty, which, by the way, we should have some sort of treaty with the Indigenous people. But she should be down talking to these parents.
Because there is an order of priority to these things.
Well,
and as you indicated,
Well, it's just
first-
common decency.
first-
as
It's
a
common
leader.
decency.
Common decency. Yes, it is
and
common decency.
if you lived in that street, you'd be frightened.
This brings us to as we were intimating before, the breakdown of that social compact in terms of the primary objective of government being to keep its people safe. We all know civilization is a mile wide but an inch deep, right? So you only need to scratch the surface and things start to fall apart rather rapidly, as we've seen in many other countries. But there doesn't seem to be yet a groundswell of public opinion strong enough to make even the opposition focus on this as strongly as they should. Yes, we know that the opposition leader was thrown out of Parliament for pushing the argument a bit too hard, and which he rightly should have done. But again, the conversation is controlled and moved on. But I don't feel as if the populace yet feels enough pain, for want of a better word, to start marching in the streets to say we want our places to be safe.
Well, that's because they're marching in the streets for things that are happening the other side of the world.
That's right, because they're marching in the streets for other things.
So
yes.
why would you be worried about what's happening thousands of kilometres from our doorsteps when we're getting people killed on our streets and we're all scared? So I must say, you're right, John. I don't have an answer to that. I think we need leadership and we don't have it.
To your point about the new commissioner, the first time I ever heard the Victorian Police admit that we have a youth gang problem, they didn't want to characterise it as an African gang problem, that we have a youth gang problem, was after this event. Up until then, it wasn't mentioned.
Well, we do, but it's not just a youth gang problem. We have the tobacco wars.
No.
So we have a massive problem in relation to that. Youth gang, tobacco wars, and then we have the anti-Semitic problem where we're firebombing synagogues and frightening Jews in our community.
And we find out that it's been paid for by the Iranians.
And it's being paid for by the Iranians. So we have a number of problems across our community, all of which goes to the point you raised, John, which is safety. The government's first priority is to make sure its citizens feel safe. I don't feel safe, I've got to tell you. I walk around the city and I ensure that I have something on me that if I get attacked, I'm able to defend myself. I'm sure many other people do the same thing. I worry all the time about my safety and my family's safety.
So one of the illustrations of what can possibly happen in Australia has been shown by America recently, where there's been a lot of social unrest in many of the huge cities in America, and the federal president has taken it upon himself to send in
The National Guard.
unarmed and
Yes.
sometimes armed
Yes.
National Guards for social unrest type situations. Is that an element that you think we could end up with in Australia if the police are not able to, with their resources, maintain law and order on the
No,
streets?
I don't think so, Alexander. I don't think so. I mean, touch wood, I'm right. But I don't think so. I mean, there are a number of aspects that we differ from the Americans. I mean, one, we don't have arms. I mean, we've never had a culture of having firearms, for example. So that's one thing. Two, we don't have as a divisive polarization of people as they have in America. And it's quite extraordinary, really. The very poor are in fact Republicans,
Yes.
and the wealthy are Democrats.
Yes. It's counterintuitive, but
it is counterintuitive.
But they're Americans,
But
so-
they're Chardonnay socialists.
Yes.
Is what I would call
well,
them.
they can
And-
afford the luxury
Socialism
of
for somebody else.
yes. Well,
Correct.
Yeah.
And we have the same here.
Yep.
I mean, if you look at the Labor Party in Australia today, many of them all come from wealthy backgrounds, all do well, and all know how to tell us how to live.
That now we're verging into the whole question of the difference between policing and overregulation. And on the topic of, if I can for a minute, moving in between the two, we have this new idea of having an e-safety commissioner, and somehow, almost in the same, with the same naive idea, I think, as the machete handbag surrender bins, we now are told that what we should be focusing on is e-safety, when physical safety is at risk. So why don't we start with the physical safety before we start moving to the e-safety, because I worry about the e-safety very rapidly morphing into tracking and censorship.
Which is already happening in the UK.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've seen it in the UK. People are arrested landing at Heathrow for a tweet.
Well, I still don't know what e-safety means at the moment. I mean,
Does anyone?
It's a catchy
well,
name.
no. If you're thinking of digital safety, that's all about cyber risk.
Yes.
People who try to steal your money, fish, do things, but otherwise, e-safety is nonsense as far
But
as
we think
I'm
we
But,
concerned.
but it's a catch-all that allows government to say, you've been saying the wrong
It
thing,
does.
you're going to get arrested.
I think you're in trouble because I think the e-safety commissioner might charge us all for discussing the fact
For even
That
talking
there's-
about
there's
it.
an
that it's
e-safety
bad.
commissioner.
So
Yeah.
let's just
Well,
watch this page.
we might have our next discussion from behind bars.
Yes.
But no, it's ludicrous. I
Quite a
mean,
bit.
the idea, yes, okay, there are certain things on the internet is a cesspool because it's the old town square magnified even more, and every lunatic can find every other lunatic, and all the perversions are there and everything is there. That's fine. We know that's the case. And I come back to your concept of parental responsibility. But to start asking adults to be tracked and verified before they can view Debbie Does Dallas that shows how old I am.
For us, for your younger
is-
viewers, that's
for the younger viewers, that
that's
was
a film from
a
the 1970s.
very soft porn 1970s movie. Lots of shower scenes, but that was it. If that
It's
is a slippery
impossible.
slope.
It is impossible though to track, and the problem with
Oh, I don't know.
government-
Ask the
Oh,
Chinese government.
AI.
Well, the Chinese government tries to do it, but
Yeah.
it's still not easy with
Mm.
AI and technology moving. And
Mm.
as I said, this is one of my businesses. I'm involved in high-speed network encryption. We protect 60 countries around the world in defence, in secret services, governments, finance.
Mm.
And I can tell you, the technology changes so quickly, and government is at least 5 years behind
right, yeah.
where the technology
Mm.
is.
You make the very valid point that whenever someone tries to police the Wild West of the internet, the technology just leaps straight over the fence.
Correct.
And finds a way to meet the demand that is clearly there and commercially viable
money in it,
for them to jump over the fence. So it's doomed to failure. But in the meanwhile, it's yet another distraction from what's physically happening on our streets. I'll use one other quick example about the top end of Collins Street, which we all know and love. I was talking recently to one of the luxury retailers there. they've experienced a 40% drop in foot traffic over the last 2 years, and that's not pandemic. This is post-pandemic recovery, but it's now dropping away again because of what you just described. People don't feel safe enough to come into the city, and I thought that this was possibly maybe people are feeling it more than it really is. She showed me CCTV footage of the regular occurrence of people forcing their way into the shops, barging past security guards and just trying to grab stuff. And staff are terrified, and of course customers are in there when that happens. And are they going to go back?
No.
So,
and you can buy online in safety from your
indeed,
own
you
home.
can buy online. So these are all additional impacts in addition to the personal safety issue. There's additional impacts. So.
But it has a social roll-on effect as well, doesn't it? Because you don't want to go into the city, so the city becomes this empty.
I'll ask you this. You've been to New York many times. Our daughter lives there. We've been there many times. I noticed that, particularly at the arrival of the current mayor, Eric Adams, for all the other things that they go on about him, he was an ex-policeman, and the first thing he did was he flooded Manhattan, central Manhattan, from the park all the way downtown with police, so that there is at least one police cruiser and a couple of policemen on every major intersection. And crime rates absolutely collapsed.
Yeah. Well, Giuliano was the first to do that, actually.
Yeah.
Whatever you think of Rudy,
yeah.
The fact is he had zero tolerance.
Yes.
And New York changed immediately, because I first went to New York in 1980. And it was a basket case. It was dangerous. Wherever you went, you didn't feel safe. You could see drug deals, particularly if you went downtown. It was, Chelsea District, Soho, those areas, very dangerous. A few years later, when he came in, New York safe. Today, I regard New York as one of the safest cities.
So do I.
In the world, quite frankly, when you walk around. The person who's going to become mayor, if he becomes mayor, it'll be a disaster. Total disaster.
So let's stay with the American theme. One of the elements that I think is missing from Australian culture or life is any requirement or desire for young people to actually contribute to society. One of Kennedy's most famous sayings was, not ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We don't have that in Australia in such a formalised way, and maybe there needs to be some process or some system to introduce children to this at a younger age, so they don't feel so enabled to go around graffitiing or smashing.
Well, detached from the acceptable norms.
Well, I think the one thing you notice about America, wherever you go, is the American flag.
How many American flags do they have?
One.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
And wherever you travel, their houses have flags flying everywhere. And I think that's the first thing you do, is be proud of your flag and who you are. So that's what I would start doing. I think the next thing is, history is very important, but don't whitewash the fact that we're all immigrants here. Yes, we have an Indigenous population, and that Indigenous population is very important to our whole culture. And I'm the first person to say that, and I've got grandchildren who are partly Indigenous. But our culture is not just Indigenous. You're Greek, Jewish, Polish, English. You're Greek, New Zealand. I'm a bitzer of everything. I go back, I'm known as Black Irish because I've got Moroccan blood in me. So we all have these bits and pieces that make us up. We should be proud of that fact.
But the unifying thing is one cultural
Is the Australian flag. Yes. We are Australians.
So there is a bit of, to me, of late, there's somewhat of a head scratch to me that the waving of the Australian flag has become characterised as fascist and racist, and the waving of a terrorist flag is somehow a sign of virtue.
Well, that's rubbish. And people flying a terrorist flag should be jailed.
But why aren't they being
For that.
arrested when this happens?
Because we've got stupid leaders.
You keep
that's
going back to
why.
that.
Okay.
Yes.
You know,
But it is a flagrant violation of a statute,
it's terrible.
and therefore the police should be
burning our flag should be an
Yes,
offence.
yes.
Right, it should be an
If somebody burns our flag, they should be jailed. I mean, no doubt about that.
We're not talking about
And
throwing away the key, but you've got to pay a price for being
You've got
stupid.
to pay
Yeah.
a price for being stupid.
because it is
Yes.
an attack on the entire country,
Correct.
And again,
it's an insult to everybody.
everybody.
Again, I want to clarify. I'm not talking about the waving of a flag of a as yet unrecognised state,
No,
but the
you're talking about
waving of a
Hamas.
Hamas flag or
Correct.
a
ISIS
ISIS flag,
Yeah.
or carrying a picture of the Grand Ayatollah, the great leader of Iran, who's funding terrorist groups. I mean, okay, you can't probably have a go at somebody for carrying a picture of a foreign leader. You might be carrying a picture of
Well, you can if that foreign leaders.
Well, if you're at war with him, you could, but
if,
yeah.
if he's sponsoring terrorist attacks in your country,
But certainly carrying a prescribed terrorists group's flag
identity.
is something that should be
Otherwise, what's the point of being prescribed?
at the very least frowned upon. But it's not even frowned upon, Francis.
No, I know. It's terrible.
So let's get back to how one returns to some sense of balance with all of this. You mentioned that you think even with a hard driving police commissioner, which we hope Mr. Bush is, it will take time.
It will.
And you need to start changing community attitudes as well. There's a community expectation of safety. Does that override this what Gad Saad describes as suicidal empathy, where somehow the perpetrator becomes the victim?
No, I think not. And I think, I'm seeing it in the community that people are fed up with crime.
Right.
Everybody is fed up with crime and they want something to be done. But the vigilante option is not the way
That's
to go.
bad.
It has to be proper policing. That's the first thing. And I think we have a person, I believe, is the right person to be able to set that culture and get proper policing. But as I said, it'd be a few years. But I think the next thing is our judiciary needs to respect the public and the public expectation. Now, they mightn't like it, but the public want to feel safe. And they don't feel safe if somebody gets given bail 7 times after committing a violent offence. It just beggars belief.
Well, it doesn't pass the pub test.
No.
Can I just ask that for the benefit of us lapsed lawyers who haven't paid enough attention to the legal system of late and the rest of the population, how do we appoint our judges in this state?
Our judges are appointed on a recommendation from the chair of the Bar Council to the government in consultation with judges and government. So I might say this, I should finish on this. Our judiciary is good. We actually have a very good judiciary. There is a problem with public expectation in relation to the bail and some sentencing. But across the board, I actually believe we have a very good judicial system. And the way of appointing judges is the right way to appoint judges. And if you lose respect of your judiciary, you really have a problem. And I have total respect of our judiciary because they're independent and they're not government-minded, unlike the Supreme Court of the United States,
which is chosen on partisan basis.
Totally different.
Yeah.
We have a high court that I respect enormously. Our state Supreme Court is made up of the best judicial people you would want, and I know many of them personally. Our magistracy is good, but I think there are problems. But the problems mainly is legislation.
This is what I
The
wanted.
legislation needs to be firmed up so that the judges and the magistrates know what is the community expectation, because the community expectation is reflected in Parliament. Parliament must make the laws, and then they...
So they're restricted by their field of action in particularly in youth cases, for example. I imagine is restricted to some degree by what the legislation is what you're suggesting.
Well,
is what you're saying.
for
Yes.
example,
Yeah.
I think if you do an adult crime, you should be tried as an adult if you're over 14.
This is
quite
what they're
frankly.
talking about in Queensland, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what it should be here.
Yeah.
If you knife somebody and you're a 14-year-old, you should be tried in an adult court and given an adult sentence. When I was a child at 10, I knew what was right and wrong. These people know what's right and wrong.
At 14, you should have a fair idea that knifing somebody is not the right thing to do, you would think.
Correct.
Yeah.
And why would you carry a knife on you in the first place?
Well,
it comes down to the thing that guns don't kill people, people kill people.
yes,
using
and
guns.
knives kill people too.
Yes.
As we've sadly seen in the case in South Carolina recently, where somebody with 17 violent convictions murdered this poor girl on the train. It was a train or a bus? A train. And now finally he's going to face some consequence. But the interesting part on that one was that the media, much like the two kids here, the media either didn't cover that story or moved on from it rapidly.
Didn't fit the narrative.
Because it didn't fit the narrative. And then we get into a whole other topic of who's stabbing whom. But it was only raised again because some conservative media commentators picked it up, and then the president picked it up. And then the governor jumps in and says, "Oh no, I'm going to call for the death sentence," and so on and so forth. So it's again a reaction to public reaction, but also it requires some leadership, somebody to take the lead.
That's what it boils down to, is just leadership. I mean, if there is an event such as that, and let's go back to those two young Sudanese boys, and the parents, they've left a terrible place to come here to safety.
For their family.
For their family.
Yes.
And these two boys are murdered in that way. I mean, where is the leadership in this state? Why isn't Jacinta Allen sitting down, breaking bread with those families? Why doesn't she do it? She has no idea.
I just want to move on to another topic as we start to wind up, and that is the rapid influx of migrant communities into Melbourne and our big cities in Sydney. It causes, we know, we're creating some financial stresses in terms of housing availability, rental housing, house prices. Does it also have some social costs in terms of cohesion, and how do we address those?
Well,
if they exist.
It obviously does have some social cost and cohesion, but we're a migrant country. My forebears came from Ireland and settled here, and everybody blamed the Irish for everything back at the start of the 20th century.
Still do, don't they?
And they still do. And Mannix, during the First World War, argued against conscription, and the Irish were blamed for that. So we have that. We have the Italian communities. We've got the Greek communities. All of them had their problems. In the 1960s, we had the market garden murders. So we had a lot of mafia. And then later, in the 80s, we had the drug marijuana out of Mildura, with the Italian families doing that. Then the Vietnamese came in after the Vietnam War, and we had the next generation of Vietnamese who were people complained about drugs and stuff like that. I think every generation after the ones that came here first create a problem because they're neither here nor there.
They feel detached.
They feel detached.
But as a migrant, as a first generation migrant, speaking as one,
Mm.
you feel that you have nothing to fall back on, and therefore you have to generate wealth and security for yourself and for your children.
Well, of course, and you
it's,
do that.
and it's very hard for migrants who come without language skills,
Yes.
or come without marketable skills to fit into the existing economic framework,
but
and that's why
that's-
they work outside of that.
Well, yes, but usually it's their children that create the problem.
Who are feeling the most
who,
attached.
who feel the most attached
Yeah.
because you're working very hard, Alexander, to make money for your children to ensure they have a good life. And generally that works. And we all know people. I know so many migrant families whose parents still didn't speak perfect English. My wife's mother didn't speak perfect English, but did it matter? No. And was she successful? Absolutely, she was successful. So I'm a great one for immigration and migrants. I must say so. I think our issue is numbers.
Yes.
We've got to be careful how we select is one, and just the numbers, because we have a housing problem, and we have two governments who have promised to deliver houses, and they are so way behind their promises. It's extraordinary.
But Minister, those are announceables. They're not reality.
I know.
So this is
But
this.
that
an issue.
again comes down to media not holding their feet to the fire.
Not
because
asking the next question,
Because
which is,
obviously
why is that?
there's no
Yeah.
opposition to hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah.
And that's a breakdown in the
Alexander,
political system.
That's exactly right. But I think I'm a great believer in immigration, I must say, because it adds to the economy. It creates momentum for the country, and in the ultimate, it provides security for us.
Yes.
Because, if you've got a population of 30 million, you're less likely to be attacked than if you've got a population of 10 million.
So just on the question of migration, though, I agree with you. Migration's a good thing, but the volume and the source also need to be considered.
Correct.
And that's not a racial selection thing. This is not the White Australia policy.
No.
It's what are your credentials really to come into this country? We recently allowed, I don't know how many thousand so-called Gazan refugees to arrive.
See, I would have issue in relation to that just because of
who would Hamas
what
let
is
out,
happening.
do you think?
People that would support them.
Thank you.
That's it.
That wasn't a huge stretch of logic, though,
No.
was it? I just want to end with a couple of things. Perhaps one of the driving issues here is we talked about the need for firm policing. We talked about the need for the guidelines for the judiciary to be there to allow them to do the job as the community expects. It all comes down to leadership. And we seem rather sadly lacking in leadership on all fronts at this point. And unfortunately, when people attempt to show some leadership, they immediately get cut down. Are we scaring away generations of potential leaders because it's just such an ugly sport?
Very good question, John. I don't know the answer. But we are bereft of leaders.
Why would anybody who was smart want to go into politics?
That's the question.
It's difficult. I mean, when I was very young, I was offered a seat in the Victorian state government, but decided to stay in law. and the reason was just I enjoyed the law better than politics.
Mm.
I don't know the answer to that.
Mm.
It's there are two things I think. I don't know the answer, but there are two
Well,
things.
there's two things.
So the first thing is the Labor Party has the wrong type of people going into politics. It has union hacks and it has professionals who have really done nothing.
Hmm.
So they've never actually understood business.
So they're professional
Or people.
politicians.
Yeah, or people more importantly. So that they don't. The Liberals do everything they can to stop women going into politics and to vote in people who are perhaps older
Mm.
and privileged
Mm.
and not the right type of people. So both sides of politics don't have the right type of people going in there. And how do you encourage it? I don't know the answer.
Mm.
I almost think you need a new political party.
Mm.
What I would do is I would take the centre-right of the Labor Party
Mm.
and merge that with the centre-left of the Liberal Party
Go back into the centre.
and create
Mm.
a centrist party.
Because the alternative, in the view of these sorts of breakdowns of law and order, is Nigel Farage.
You get the
And I mean, you know,
extremities.
he's a smart bloke. He's figured out that there's a gaping hole to the right of the Conservatives, and he's going to fill it.
Yes, but he's the person who led England to Brexit.
Yeah.
And I don't think Brexit is economically the right thing for England.
No, but
So
But the people who made the decision on that wouldn't understand
But
first base
again-
economics.
well, they'll all die in the next 5 years
because it was an age thing.
because
yes.
it was an age
Yes.
thing. That's the
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
look, Farage is good, but I
Like all populist leaders, they're not entirely wrong all the time. In fact, the reason they get purchased is because they're right about a bunch of they're right about a bunch of common sense issues, but what comes with it is usually not great.
and we need to encourage younger leaders.
Yeah.
We need younger people to stand up and say, I want to do this.
If I can finish on an optimistic note, because it can be
please.
very easy to be pessimistic about all this. Generally, I mean, there is the great John Howard liked to say that generally the Australian people get it right. He's been largely correct. I don't believe they were right the last election, but then the opposition didn't offer them any meaningful alternative, so I'm not entirely surprised. Is there in the Australian character, I hope, a self-centering sort of mechanism that we can correct some of these lapses that we've fallen into?
If you asked me that 10 years ago, I would say yes.
Mhm.
But no.
Do they care? Because we also found out that more than 50% of the voting population is now beholden to the government for all, if not all, then a large chunk of their livelihood.
And that's the greatest problem with our politics, and that makes me despair, because we've never had such a proportion of the population beholden to government. And this government is socialist.
Yes.
And more than socialist, this government tells people, if we go to that
Safety
commissioner, they're telling us how to live. The Chinese are being told how to think.
Yes.
Russians are told how to think. The leadership, of course, is totally different. The Australians are basically honest and good, and the pub test is the right thing.
Yes.
But we have leaders now who are conning us.
Sadly,
revolution is the only option then, isn't it?
well, yes, that'll get you cancelled. But look, it's been a fantastic conversation. I'm not sure we've got the answers. Other than one answer is very clear: we do need some firm leadership. We can only hope that the new police commissioner here in Victoria gets enough time and enough
And budget.
support
Yeah.
to do what he needs to do. I'm sure he knows what he needs to do, and by the sounds of him, he's the right sort of chap to do it. But does he get the support and does he get the time to do it? As you point out, it's not something. It's not a matter of the moment. It's going to take some time. We can only hope that some leadership emerges.
Yes. Well, good luck with that.
Good. Francis, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you, gentlemen.